All right,
There
we
we go.
should be live now.
Okay.
Hey, cool.
Hello, everyone. Just gonna give everyone a second to load up the streams and say hello back. Now I can see we got Yoshi. We have the priest. I can see Ducky as well. Ducky is
Yeah, got Jin.
yeah. Of course we have Gene. I've sent the link to Gene ready.
Got Barry,
There's Barry. Hello.
Gilly.
How are you all doing? Hi gamers, yeah, hello Ducky. So, welcome to Kindred Talks number 4. We somehow made it to number 4 when I didn't even think we were getting past 2. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, just want to introduce you to all our guests. So, we'll start with our usual co-hosts.
Oh, is that supposed to be me and Rob?
If you wanted to be.
Okay. Yeah. So hello. I'm Andrew. I'm the Skymill community manager.
And I am Rob, the game's creative director.
And also, our special guests for this round, we have John and Sheila Wallace. If you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Sure. I'm John Wallace. I'm one of the developers on the project.
And I'm Sheila Wallace. I'm the almost latest developer to be on the project. I guess I've had one more addition since I've come on board at the beginning of May.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So, are we ready for some questions?
I think
Sure.
so. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna just clear this one out of the way first of all. This one comes from Nebby, who's asked, so since no new names have been submitted for Salamurder, does that mean Salamurder is the official name of it now?
Yes, 100%.
That is a great question. It's we catch ourselves even internally sometimes referring to it as Salamurder, which is unexpected, but I guess a good sign for those who are hoping it'll keep its name. We still haven't officially decided on what its name will be yet, and that's really the only reason why you haven't seen any new names for that. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. And like I said, we still occasionally call it that internally.
Same.
We have Becky asking about Shovelbutt as
Yeah,
well, its
probably
name.
probably the same answer for Shovel Butt.
Same. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. So, I'm gonna move to a question now to John and Sheila. Are you ready for your first question?
Sure.
Oh, can't wait.
So this one comes from Tyus, who asks, "What have you had the most fun coding so far?"
I definitely have had the most fun coding up the abilities, the attacks. Um, it's fun to see all those things come together. You know, when we get VFX in, and I can actually hook it up to code and um, blow stuff up.
Yeah.
I think she blew up was me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time in the combat arena, John didn't realize I had health turned on,
Yeah.
so I shot him dead
Yeah.
before he fired back.
I was gone. She just blew me away. Anyway,
The history books.
Yep.
yeah. For me, probably it's been the writing all the network synchronization code, the just making sure that when you spawn something on one computer, it shows up on the server, and then it gets replicated out to all the other clients, and then keeping all those things in sync. So that was kind of mainly because that's kind of a milestone for us to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And then the other things I really, really like on the project are just all the code organization things. Are we doing using the right code? Are we putting it in the right place? Are we calling it the right things? Are we using the right patterns? And are we aligning ourselves with where Unity is going to go so that 3 years from now, they're not in a totally different place than where we are. So that alignment's really important. And there's really no right or wrong answers, but they're better and there are worse answers. And so that makes it kind of fun. It's kind of open ended, and for me, that's kind of where I get my jollies is doing those architecture kind of things.
Awesome. I'm gonna extend the question to Rob and Andrew as well. What's been the most fun for you guys on
Ooh.
top of
Oh,
everything
sure.
done so far?
Do you want to go first,
Do
Rob?
you want to go first, Andrew?
No, you go.
Okay. Well then, let's see. I would say the character controller part of it. It's similar to, I guess, the feeling of creating new attacks, but um, when we finally get animations in for characters that, for a long time have just been concepts on paper, and finally you get to see the model, and then the animations come in, and then you start putting things together,
The
and you can
VFX.
actually control it. That's really rewarding. Even if you can't really do anything with them yet, just having a new character that for the longest time has been just something that's been on paper, but now you can actually control it and walk around the world. That to me is one of the best feelings.
Yeah, for me, it's probably. So I haven't done any code since like the very beginning, and I'm sure all of that's been overwritten. Um,
Not all of it.
not all
Not
of
all
it?
of it actually. No.
Huh, that's surprising. Um, well, it should be. Um, yeah, the design stuff that I got to do super early on, like the original design document that we made for, at the time called Project Apollo. Um, yeah, that was really fun. Like coming up with the sort of core pillars being the uh, the open world, the action combat, the AEI that we thought we were definitely gonna have in, which thankfully we hit that stretch goal. Um,
Mhm.
and the branching evolutions. I absolutely loved designing those ideas, and the type interactions too. I was all really happy with those ideas.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, there we go. So, next question now, sort of based on what was your favorite thing to code, is what has been your favorite bug that you have found in the game development for Kindred, but the public don't know about?
Ooh, you know, I did get a wonderful bug from Sheila the other day that I haven't shown off. Would you like to explain that to him, Sheila?
Or yeah, when we're working on the new, we're using the new player input system, and we had a bug in Bear's jumping ability where you could make him jump, but then he would just never come down, but you could still move him around. So it's kind of like having a helium balloon of Bear, and he would just float around all over the place, and
It
you
also,
can make him jump again, and he jump a little
yeah,
higher, and
it
then all of a sudden he gets stuck someplace. So
from the clip you sent me, it also seemed like his momentum never went down either. So every time he moved, he got faster.
yep.
Oh, it was really a balloon flying around
The
the.
Ember rocket exists.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then his rotation was all screwed up, so he was like walking sideways.
And so that would screw up his like gravity too.
Yeah,
So he
Mhm.
would he would fall like sideways.
yeah.
Yoshi says, I love it, leave it in the game.
It's a feature.
It's a feature.
I will have to post that once the stream's over.
And another one from Jeanette. Jeanette's been really excited about asking questions this time, but uh, has Kynite's main been fixed? The smoke visual effects also
Mm.
throws Andrew at Rob for no reason
Ooh, I've
because
been
Gene can
thrown.
do that.
Well, it's funny that um, they ask about the smoke. We just recently started doing some stuff with that again within the last 2 days.
Hmm.
So yeah, just really funny timing. We haven't touched the smoke um, really since the Kickstarter trailer um, up until very recently. So not with Kanite's smoke specifically, but there's another character that is as of yet unannounced, and uh, they also have some kind of smoky, uh, wafty sort of um, uh, pieces on their character model as well, and we're trying something new out with that character and with how we're animating that. And if that technique works well, then we'll probably continue to use that on the rest of the characters that have things like that. So like Ember and K-Knight. So it's not fixed yet, but we're trying something new, and so far the animation and modeling teams seem to be happy with the direction that it's going in. So we'll see how it goes.
Nice, some exciting stuff. I know everyone's getting angsty. They're all getting teased by the unannounced kinfolk there.
Do we have a code name for it?
We do, and this one
Ooh,
this one wasn't. We were gonna wait to put it on the progress board until we had uh, basically confirmation that we could start on the animations for it, um, because probably this was going to be one that um, we concepted and modeled, but then it would just sort of sit on the back burner for a really long time, and we didn't want to clog things up or um, uh, give people the impression that we just keep like starting things and not finishing them. There's more that goes into development, and we're just not able to continue on certain pieces um, until other things come in. But yeah, the code name for this one, and we'll probably go ahead and put it up on the progress board since, well, as long as we can get the animations for it soon. The code name for this one is Cinderkinder.
Cinderkinder.
Hmm.
there we go. Oh, see, everyone's just waiting for everyone to explode with love for that name now.
I did see a panda hugging a heart, and that is very cute.
No.
Is it a Kinder Surprise egg?
we no more spoilers. We got to tease Priest with this now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will forewarn the chat in advance. The next few questions will dive into a lot more technical Kindred coding style questions. So just so you're aware going forward for the next few. But we'll start with the first one, which we got from our very own Berry Bandit. Can we have it up ears in the chat? Hey, Berry. For people who want to get into developing, what would you guys recommend as a starting point, the basic steps to start any form of developing?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is just do it. There's so many resources out there right now. Find something that you want to do, an iOS game, a Unity game, an app, a website, whatever it is. Go out and take a course. I do a lot of courses on Udemy, but there are other sites out there as well. I kind of view the courses as a way to have someone who's an expert who knows way more than I do about some piece of technology teach it to me in a way that is the easiest to learn and is teaching me the most important pieces. And there's so many great coding courses out there that you can take, but most importantly, write. The only way to get good at programming is to code. Don't think too much about when you're going to start. Just find something you like, take a course, start. I've worked with many programmers that have taken that path, and you can develop very deep technical skills. It also takes a lot of hours. Don't be afraid to be confused and be lost, because the struggle is part of the fun of programming, because that's all we do is puzzles all day long, and so that's the path I would take.
There's
I
also
was yeah.
great tutorials out there that are, specific to this particular feature or this particular, if you're doing iOS, here's how you set up your life cycle for everything. Or if you're doing Unity, here's, something new about ECS and dots that just came out. And it's really easy to kind of take bite-sized pieces. Like, you don't have to do everything all at once. Find a tutorial that's going to set up a project for you, but then you can concentrate on the specific parts that you want to learn.
Yeah.
And the community out there is just, it's incredible. There's a lot of support out there for new programmers, experienced programmers, it runs the whole range.
And start easy. Start
Yeah.
something that's really within your
Hello
goal.
World is usually the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Just something like that, I imagine, would be the best to start with.
absolutely.
Yep.
And then
Okay, so you. Oh,
how many years experience do you both have with programming?
About a million.
Decades.
Yeah. Can you
We've learned many
Many,
technologies over the years.
many different
and,
technologies.
So that's a common pattern for us.
And what's really cool is there's always something new to learn. You never get tired of it. And I read a Quora post the other day about what makes good programmers really good programmers. And the response was, you program at work and then you go home and you program on your own hobby or, whatever you find interesting that's not at work. You're always programming. You're always learning.
Very true.
Or if you're Rob, you're just always working.
Yeah. Well, it's more like I can't tell if I'm working or doing what
Enjoying.
yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly, pre-Kickstarter, that was like the constant state I was in, was just like, well, this is work, but this is
A hobby for you.
right. There's a point where it crosses over from being a hobby to something more, but it's very blurred, where that line is. At least
I think
at
we've
least
passed
in
it.
that yeah, I think we're past that though.
Yeah.
I think
I would say
Fingers
we're totally
crossed.
past it.
but I still enjoy all the programming work that I get to do as much as I did back then. So,
Oh,
but not that I get to do quite as much.
Yeah.
Kind of handed that over to John and Sheila for the most part,
The delegation has happened.
for sure.
So, Sheila, you mentioned earlier about the ECS dot system. So, we have a question from Gilthrak from he's common in our chats as well. He's asked, it's a pretty decent recent technology for Unity. How do you guys feel about it so far? Was it what you expected before you dove in and checked everything out?
I love this question.
It is different from a lot of the other programming paradigms. It's very much more data centric, and it's different from object-oriented programming completely. Just the way you think about how you have to organize the data that's going to be going back and forth between the servers and the clients, and optimizing those so they're as small and as efficient as possible. And we've done that before in the past, but you kind of get away from that when now you've got so much memory and you've got so much virtual memory, and usually you don't really have to think about those things. Even on iOS and Android right now, just go ahead and allocate it. It'll get garbage collected later. You can't do that in this and have it be really efficient. So that has you have a different way of thinking about how you're programming.
John, I think you mentioned at one point too that, like, in some ways, ECS and dots almost feels like the exact opposite way that you would usually do that, or like in any other circumstance, that setup would be like the opposite of what you would try for.
Yeah, that's so true. The right way to do things in dots would be considered an anti-pattern in say an object-oriented approach. And it's interesting. The other thing is dots is definitely a moving target right now. It's not 100% there. They're doing a lot of things. The foundation's there, and the foundation's solid. So the idea of entities and systems and the component data, all that stuff is fine and it works real well. But everything they're building on top of it, for example, things like netcode, which we are using in this project, is still under development. And then things like the animators and the uh, um,
Physics bodies.
yeah, all those kind of things. They're they're not there yet, and so us adopting dots and ECS, while I think it's going to be a really great thing for us 3 years from now, I'm not so sure it's going to be the easiest path for us to follow up through then. And that's part of the thing where we're trying to make a guess about, are we aligning ourselves properly with Unity? But yeah, Rob, to your point, there are definitely things that we do in dots and ECS that we just would not ever do in other programming environments.
Yeah. Yeah, the animator too. That's another one of those things that's like it's a moving target, or we're just sort of waiting on them to um, develop the more official version, or official support for animations over dots and ECS. But until then, we have to roll our own.
Well,
Oh,
and we rely heavily on then the game objects as well. So ultimately, we'd be moved across into dots and ECS, and game objects would be almost non-existent. For us, it's we're using dots and ECS at our data and networking layer, but all of our visuals right now are being done using game objects, and so that's a little older, more mature Unity technology. And there's a lot of third-party support for that. So you can go to the asset store, and there's some great assets out there, whether it's the kinematic character. The kinetic character controller, or the third-party camera controllers, or whatever they happen to be. There is a big, deep ecosystem of tools that are available for dealing with things at that game object layer. And so we do heavily leverage that as well
Mm,
for that layer of our code.
yeah. Something that I've heard people ask before as well is that, why are we using ECS and dots? Don't we, aren't those typically used for games that are going to have like a ton of objects on screen at once, or, swarms of characters? That's not something that we've really talked about. So why are we
Yeah.
um, using those technologies?
So I don't know that we would be using dots and ECS if we hadn't hit a couple of our Kickstarter goals. When we got into co-op, that now meant we needed to be dealing with data sharing, client server or peer to peer, however we decided to do it. And then as we got environmental interactions, now all of a sudden we are dealing with many more objects, and the world's a pretty big world, and the so the ability for us to do those things, dots made that possible. Now, sure, there are other ways we could have done that. We could have been using older technologies that are no longer supported by Unity, things like Mirror, and a lot of games use that. But it's again a question of alignment. Are we aligning ourselves with where Unity's putting all their money, and they're putting all their training, and they're putting all their documentation, and their where they're going, and it's pretty clear that ECS and DOTS is really where they're going to go. And but again, we really wouldn't have to do that if we weren't a multiplayer game, and having a lot of potentially a lot of interactions with the environment.
yeah, so I hope that was a good enough answer for you, Gil. Oh, he says, "Oh man, thank you for that answer. I have a dev background, used to be object-oriented code, and that's a very interesting concept." He's going to read some more material about the dot system in future as well.
The
So,
Unite videos on ECS and dots are a good place to look for that. That's the other thing that we didn't mention about the programming, but if you want to find out what they're doing at their annual conferences, all the videos are online now. So that's a great resource.
oh, there you go, Gil. Some extra resources for you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the. And I've been told off by Jeanette at the moment. So these are actually Jeanette's questions. There's two very in-depth ones. They've decided to take the sneaky route of asking these particular questions from when I chatted with him. So we're going to start with the first one. Are you using addressables, shader graphs, visual effects graphs, UI elements, the builder, and the new input system? And in addition to that, do you have any implemented localization or a simple state machine for the combat interaction? And is there any custom editor tools that you guys have to speed up the game development?
Man, what a meaty question.
Yeah, and I can imagine the chat is just listening to that. Just what are we discussing?
Quite the technobabble.
Yep. So addressables, no, but only we're using something very, very much like addressables. We may use addressables if we get into downloadable content, but we do have something very much like addressables where we have a scriptable object based table of our characters and our abilities, so we can load things in by name. And that's one of the things addressables give you, is being able to load things in by name. Shader graph and visual effect graph, not yet. Doesn't mean we won't. That's something really more of a Rob thing. And we keep talking about what we're going to be doing there. They're really cool technologies, and both of them have some real strengths, and they're neat technologies. But that's something that we may use. But again, hasn't been decided.
We do use Amplify shader for all of the VFX currently, for what that's worth.
No, cool.
Mhm.
Good thing to point out. UI elements and UI builder, yes, absolutely. Those things are really cool. And I hate building web apps. My least favorite thing to build.
Wait,
Um,
really?
oh gosh, I
Yeah.
really,
Oh, me
really
too.
do. I
Oh my
really do.
gosh.
Oh gosh,
You've spent so much time building web apps.
I it's my least favorite of things to build.
I'm
And
so sorry.
I know. And well, only because it has all these different browsers, and it can be a real pain.
Your testing matrix is huge.
Yeah, and then I kind of anyway. I could go on and on about why I don't like it, but so it's kind of funny that now that we have with UI elements and UI builder something that's really a lot like CSS and being able to do like the Chrome debugger. Um, I'm excited about that because those are features that we will leverage, even though I don't like them in the web context. Localization, we really don't have a lot of text in there yet, but we'll definitely be using localization. I don't know which state machines we'll be using. Simple state machine might be one, but it's too soon for us to know. That's something that would be easier to ask about in probably 5 or 6 months as we get past the combat arena and we're dealing with some things that are more in that space that we need to be implementing.
And we are using the new input system. So
Oh.
I think that's going to make
It's awesome.
handling all the different input devices a lot easier.
Yep.
Awesome. So that was the first of the meaty questions. So yeah, honestly, Jeanette has been extremely excited. They posted a lot of really cool questions, but we had to limit them down. And these were the best ones that we could pick out. But the second question from Jeanette, the latest version of C# is 8.0, and Unity doesn't currently support it yet. But what are you most excited for with the new version of C# in relation to Unity? Because it adds some interesting features that could leverage the programming part to potentially improve performance of the game. And in addition to that, the Unity IL to C PP, hot potato or not?
Want me to talk about it? So
So C# first of all.
sure. So first of all, C#, wonderful language. I love programming in C#. It's a lot in the languages that either come from it or it comes from have been favorites of mine for a long time. Things like Java, which C# is kind of a follow-on to Java, or things like Swift or Kotlin on iOS and Android programming, which really borrowed heavily from C#. So it's a very familiar language. It's a very mature language. We use a lot of the generics in C# when we're doing our coding, and there are some things about Unity's version of C# that are a little problematic. For example, the way they handle nulls, we can't you really use the null coalescing operator. Sometimes it's called
you get used to it in Swift, and then you're like, I can't
or
use it
Kotlin,
here.
Swift or
I
Kotlin.
hate this.
Yeah,
I have null checks all over the place, and
it makes
you don't have to do that.
Makes the code ugly.
Yep.
Not having the Elvis operator.
Yep.
And then there's also, what was the other thing? And then they don't implement the memory DLL yet properly that has support for stack alloc, and so that has caused me no ends of. You want to avoid garbage collection at all costs, and so we do a lot of things to make sure that we're not allocating memory unless we absolutely have to, and so that means that we have pools of things that we pull things from, or we allocate things when we allocate a buffer that we use when we first create a game object, and so I kind of wish that the Unity guys would either not have boxed themselves into the corner with how they did the nulls, or that they would implement some of the things that are even in 7.0, let alone 8.0. As far as the IL to CPP, don't know yet. Very intrigued by it. Hot potato or not, don't know yet. The basic idea is that everything, rather than being compiled into the DLL, the IL gets converted into native C++ that gets compiled by a native compiler, and we don't really do a lot of things that are algorithmic in this project. So I don't know if we'll need it. It might make debugging harder. Again, it's one of those things I'll probably have an answer for 6 months or 12 months from now, as we get to the place where we're really looking at how do we optimize performance in certain key areas, and if we find that we do have issues with performance. I'm really not seeing things right now that look like we would benefit all that much by IL to CPP. I don't know, Sheila, do you have any other thoughts about that?
No, that pretty much sums it up.
Oh. Yeah, and we do have a final part of the meaty question. So it's which IDE do you guys prefer to code in? Is it Rider, Visual Studio, or the Studio Code, Mono? What do you guys prefer?
I'm currently using Visual Studio Code. I just find it's simple enough. Debugging in it is kind of weird because you have to go back and forth between Unity and Visual Studio Code, and I'm not used to that. I mean, I've used a lot of kind of all-in-one environments like Xcode and Android Studio and things like that. And then I've also done the opposite. I've actually done a fair amount of AWS Lambda programming. I actually wrote an Alexa skill and a Google Assistant um, piece of code. So those were all up in the cloud. So you're basically doing your debugging by console.logs. So I've been at both end of the range where everything's all in one, or you can't debug here. You have to go deploy and then debug. And this is kind of weird that you're always going back and forth between these two different environments. So that took a bit of getting used to.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I mean, I love JetBrains products. I've used them a lot, and so I kind of bounce back and forth between using Rider and VS Code. Everyone on the project's got VS Code, so it's kind of easy for me to pop onto their machines, I don't know, I kind of develop a muscle memory to do all the command keys to do things, and so for me, switching back and forth between IDEs, I have to sometimes revert to going up and figuring out what the command keys are from the menu. So I probably use VS Code a little bit more, but I might jump back over and use Rider again. I don't know.
Lovely. So I hope I know there's a lot of confusion in the chat because there are a lot of people who don't know development the development language, but
Mhm.
there are plenty of people as well who've been excited. But we're going to break up the coding section a bit to going to ask a question from Roxas. So this is for the Rob and Andrew side of
Okay.
questions. We got: would you use monsters from other games in Kindred Fates, or would you allow other games to use Kinfolk? So like a cross promotion, and if so, what would the requirements be?
I feel like I know where this is going. I don't know if we would put anything else in Kindred Fates, but if for whatever reason and some miracle, we were asked if one of our kinfolk could be in Super Smash Brothers, I think we'd absolutely say yes.
So if it was
Yeah.
Smash Bros, yes.
There's no way we could say no.
Yeah, there's very few exceptions to the no, but certainly if we were to receive an envelope, we wouldn't be
Yeah,
turning that down.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, to think that we would get that is fairly
yeah.
I don't know. That's just not going to happen.
Did
So
you,
I try not to think about it.
do you agree with with what I said about the first half of that question, Rob?
Well, it's interesting. There's one other kind of piece to this. Um, Believe it or not, there was kind of an opportunity for something like that to happen, although not nearly to the degree of like Smash Bros. Um, for a bit there, we were looking at potentially including a character from another um, monster catching game as a kinfolk. And I had talked with the developer of that project about potentially that character being in both games, um, or if there was any possibility of um, them joining our roster. And we talked about it for a couple of weeks, and ultimately decided that it wasn't really going to work. But um, suffice to say that it's something that we've talked about with other developers in the past.
Hmm.
Oh, okay, so we're going to go back to John and Sheila here. We've got another question from Barry, and it is: how did you meet Rob, and how did you get together for this project?
Uh
Well, yeah. Sorry, Rob. You already see. So Sheila and I are married, and we've done a lot of software projects. Some together, some separate, and
Some at other companies, some working from home for clients, some
some
working on site for clients.
some in companies that we started.
Yep.
So because we've done a number of sort of serial entrepreneurial kind of companies, and so we and so Tori introduced us to Rob, and he's a roommate of ours, gosh, for years. And the typical pattern would be Sheila and I would leave in the morning, and Rob would be playing a video game. And
You're about
Sheila
to
would
do
get
him
home,
real
right?
dirty.
Rob playing a video game. And you'd say, "Hey, Rob, do you want to come grab some food?" And he'd say, "Oh gosh, I'm working on the design of a video game." And this went on and on and on. It was always, designing video games, building, playing on video games, talking about building video games, that kind of thing. And so I started a company, gosh, it's been, I don't know, 4 years ago, with a buddy of mine, and called Pixel. And Rob was one of the people that we hired, and he came in, and he was working for us, doing QA and then game development. He was working on a game that he designed and pitched, and we thought it sounded like an awesome game. And it was a Unity game on iOS. And so um, then so let's see. So Rob, I think along the way we moved out. We moved to a new place, and Rob moved out, and but we still we would still see each other on projects. We were working on an iOS project together right when the Kindred Fates um, was being developed. This is all pre-Kickstarter. Rob was basically dragging himself in every day to this company that he and I were doing work for, and I was doing iOS work, and we'd go out and grab some lunch, and he'd tell me all about Kindred Fates, and was working on that Kickstarter, and and that's kind of, I followed along, and then the Kickstarter came out, and I supported the Kickstarter, and then I joined after the Kickstarter was a rip roaring raging success, and then I guess Sheila probably joined about 6 weeks after that. So yeah, so we went from Rob working for me to me working for Rob, and
Yep.
it's been really, really good. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It really has been a lot of fun.
And somebody mentioned in the Twitch chat, yeah, the iOS game was Rain Runner.
Yeah, we mentioned that one in a previous podcast.
Yep.
I believe that was
Um,
the first one, the first podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, real briefly. I think there were even at the time some people that were like, "Oh, you got to finish it," and
Still some people
sure,
saying
yeah, we'll
you'll
finish it if you want to delay everything by another 6 months.
No, not 6 months. Probably like a week.
We're not going to finish it for a while. It's a really, really good game, though. It's an awesome. It's a 2D digging game. It's a really, really neat concept.
Yeah,
And
it's a time waster, but it's a fun time waster.
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun to play. It's a lot.
Okay, I've got a question in chat from Jeanette, again, pretty much their dev background. They would just like to know, because you're using a server client architecture, wondering if you've tried to bring a person from Europe, just somewhere international, to test out latency and lag.
We've not yet. It is one of the things that we have on our roadmap to test. Um, doing playing the game across regions there's definitely lag there. When you're playing, like for example, within just the U.S. or if you're playing sometimes between various regions in North America and South America, you're fine. I actually went through and did a latency analysis recently. I have to pull that up, but the upshot is that that's something we will be testing. We do a lot of things right now with prediction, which really helps out. So that way you're predicting where things are going to be, so that things will be synchronized. And so great question, and definitely something that we'll have a lot more information about as we move forward. And it really, the constraint there is the speed of light, and how well does how well do the major internet backbone support data moving from Europe to the United States and back.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we are looking at rollback netcode, right?
Yeah. So what we do is we do prediction with rollback, and the idea is that for most things the prediction will hit, and it'll be good. Sometimes though you'll see things where you need rollback, and the best examples would be you run against the edge of a building, and it looks like it should have succeeded, but it didn't. And so you now need to have the character who looks like they went past the edge of the building now needs to be blocked by the edge of that building, as an example. So
Jeanette says, if you do need an international gameplay tester, you know where to call.
we will definitely take Jeanette up on that.
One final question I got from the chat. This is more for the lore master, Rob. It's from Priest. Asks whether the mecha kins are some form of advanced sentient AI, or are they simply man-made vessels, or something of that sort for a kinfolk soul?
Ooh, all great questions, and ones that will definitely be explained over the course of the game. Sort of the origins of the mecha, and how they are the way they are, and what they are. I guess as usual, I'll probably still keep this pretty cryptic and vague, but rest assured it'll definitely be explained within the story. We don't want to give away too much beforehand.
TBA.
Yep.
We do have that written out though, for what it's worth.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so going to give another sort of disclaimer for the chat. We're going to go back to some more technical questions again, so please be prepared. Returning back to John and Sheila, since the game is rewritten in the ECS framework, uh, I would assume the moves are entities, but how do you ensure that each move has different effects, damage type, move types, the range or melee? And how are you planning to scale the system for said entities so the system can expand for more move entity varieties? And that was from Unknown Nerd.
So yeah, we are using the entities to basically carry the information back and forth from client to server, server to the other client, but we're relying heavily on game objects for a lot of the, for example, for the animations, for the abilities animations. So we're kind of walking this fine line between ECS dots and game objects. And so far it's working well. The systems for ECS are in charge of a lot of the logic, though, and that is basically so that the server's in charge. For example, for dealing damage and things like that, we've got systems in place that are set up to manage health, and that'll always be on the ECS side. What we're trying to do is make it easier for ourselves down the road, because we know eventually game objects are going to go away. So we don't want a lot of our logic living in the game objects. So we're just basically treating those right now as an object that has a rigid body and physics and an animator. And eventually, when that gets switched over to new versions in ECS, hopefully that'll make our job easier.
Yeah. And things are organized in layers. The bottommost layer is the ECS layer, and it's where the data and the networking live. And the layer above that's the kindred layer, and that's where the game objects for the characters and the abilities live. And it turns out that the most complicated thing there is just dealing with the abilities. The abilities, especially passives, change the way everything works, because you can have a passive ability that modifies, say, the way a physics system would work, or the way time works, in theory. So that's really where all the real complexity is dealing with the abilities and so forth. Now, as far as being able to deal with different movement types, we have quadrupeds and bipeds and flyers and swimmers. All of those have base classes that have a character controller designed for those type of objects. So um, the way all this stuff works is you get to kind of mix and match which capabilities each individual character has, so that if it's a biped, it has one character animator. If it's a swimmer, it has a different character controller. So um, it's it's kind of a cool system in how it's put together. It's very simple, and it needs to be, because this system is going to have, gosh, hundreds of characters and hundreds of abilities. So it's something that we needed to develop in a way that would easily scale across all of those without adding lots of complexity.
Hmm, lovely. Okay, so we have another meaty question from our one and only Jeanette. So again, another technical question. So what kind of libraries do you guys use in the Unity project? And in addition to that, are you aware of Odin, Dotween, Playmaker, the Azure Nature, the Living Particles libraries, and are there any other awesome Unity packages that can be found in the asset store? And what do you guys think of them?
Jeanette said the cursed word.
Which one?
Libraries.
No. uh,
Playmaker.
yeah, I'll I'll let you guys talk about
Oh,
that stuff, and then when it gets to
you go for it, Rob. We have our opinion.
Go on. Go for it.
okay, all right, I'll talk briefly, I guess, about Playmaker. Um, Definitely, we're familiar with it, and pre-Kickstarter we used Playmaker for a couple different pieces of the character controller, namely dodging, jumping, movement. Movement was still animation based, so we didn't drive um, the movement of like the character itself, but we handled logic for like which animations would play um, with Playmaker. Let's see, we handled some gravity logic with it, a couple just various things like that around the character controller. Um, I personally found that with the amount of C sharp that we were using um, in just the code all over the place, and the rest of stuff like abilities and things like the camera controller and you name it, that um, keeping Playmaker around was a lot more harmful than helpful. Um, what I found was that it's very, very difficult to get Playmaker to talk nicely to C sharp, um, and that communicating back and forth between um, Playmaker as a language and C sharp as a language was just way too cumbersome, and ended up causing numerous bugs and headaches. So I'm very thankful to um, kind of have that. Well, we've since removed Playmaker from all the character controller stuff, and we don't use it anymore. It's still a wonderful tool, and for some games, um, it works perfectly, and they can kind of handle all of their logic with Playmaker. There's games that use Playmaker entirely for all of their games logic, and they don't even have to worry about C sharp, and that's fantastic. And certainly it's a great visual way to get logic set up, and it can make some things much faster. So I don't think Playmaker as a whole is bad, but um, definitely for our project, it just wasn't going to work, and so I've got, I don't know, kind of a history with that. That anytime Playmaker comes up, I just wince in pain.
Fair enough. So, on to John and Sheila's answer then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the asset store is one of the amazing benefits of Unity, and there's so much up there. Odin is something that we probably will be using. I We have a lot of our own custom editor windows where we're able to turn off on and off certain things so that we're able to debug. And as that list grows, Odin's really nice at being helping us to organize that so that those windows have tabs and you can, when you click on one of the buttons, it'll call something directly in the editor. And so Odin looks like it'll be very handy, but it's not yet integrated in with the project. Let's see. Dutween probably will do something there. Rob, I know, has looked at Azure Nature and Living Particles, and again, those are more on the visual side of things, and that's really about whether that's the right path or whether us doing more custom things there. Um, we're also using a wonderful asset called GPU Instancer that is really fantastic. Um, Easy Save is one we might use as well. There will be a number of things that we'll be doing for when we are doing our state machines that I'm sure will be based on things of the asset store because there's no reason for us to reinvent those wheels. Um, and so it's a little too soon for us to have a comprehensive list for where we ultimately end up. But those are some great tools, and we leverage them as heavily as we can.
Yeah, it really makes the life of a developer so much easier and speed things up a lot. Save yourself so much headache, so many hours like fixing bugs and redesigning things when you can just use the same tools that like tons of people are already using, and they have great documentation and stuff like that. So um, it just makes the project stronger as a whole.
Yeah. Oh, Kinematic Character Controller is one that we recently added. I know
Mhm.
Rob really liked that one.
Oh yeah.
Um, and third-person cameras is another one by Advanced Utilities. That's another one that we've been using to great success. So yeah, it's a fantastic resource.
Mhm.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Sheila?
Nope.
Nope, that was everything.
Pretty much
Oh, lovely.
I'm sure we'll be looking into other ones, and I agree that the asset store is definitely a good resource.
Okay, so going back to Rob and Andrew, this is a question from Mindless discussing about the next 3 years until release.
Mm-hmm.
What will the update schedule for the game look like? Will it be similar to now for the whole time, or will we get more/less news as time goes on? Are we going to see every Kinfolk before release?
Several good questions there.
Yeah, so as for I sincerely hope you don't get less news. I
Yeah.
can't imagine that you would, but I also don't know if more news. I think maybe the quality of the news we give out will be better,
I
maybe?
think it depends on um, what it is that you're looking at
Yeah.
specifically. So,
Um,
for example, like when the Alpha Combat Arena comes out, we'll be pushing out updates to that all the time.
yeah.
Really as often as we're able to for things like bug fixes or adding new features. Um, so for sure, the like current pace of our community updates and our social media posts and streams like this one, those will continue at the same rate that they are. Um, but you can expect like other types of updates too, in the form of like I don't know the actual game that you get to play, which is going to be really fun.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, we'll be updating that, um, and I think um, that'll be a lot more of um, the content that we focus on
Yeah.
um,
As
once
for
that's something that's out there.
will you see all the kinfolk? We've answered that before, I think, but no, you won't. We definitely want to have a lot of the fun of the game be seeing a kinfolk out in the world and then, getting it and then the curiosity of what it's going to turn into.
Hmm. Um, we want to keep as much of that a mystery as we can
Do you want to
without totally starving you guys.
do you want to tell them what your current thought is on how many we want to reveal pre-launch?
It's hard to say
Well, we
because
have a rough number that I keep on trying to get you to push up, but
yeah, it I don't want to commit to any
okay,
like
okay.
specific number just because it changes.
It does. It does change a lot.
And yeah, and there's also like with the alpha coming out and the beta,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I could see things changing there too. But certainly um, we want to leave as much mystery for the game as we can because you can only experience it once,
Yep.
and then there's never going to be a second time that you see one of the kinfolk for the first time or that
Yeah.
you encounter it for the
It's a
first
lot more
time. So we want
special
to
if you're
leave that
seeing
as
that in game.
yeah.
Hmm, awesome. Uh, we're gonna go back now. We've got some final questions. If you guys in the chat have any more questions you wish to ask Rob, Andrew, or John and Sheila, do let us know now because we will be wrapping up soon. But I'm gonna go back to a question from Barry. He has asked, "What's been the most difficult part of developing Kindred Fates?" So the other end of the scale now.
Ooh. I
Do we want to start on the development side or on the like game design side?
I think
Let's start.
anything.
Yeah, let's start over
Let's
on your.
start with the game design.
Sure.
Okay.
Um, well, I would say, at least for me personally, one of the hardest things to design around has consistently been the sentience.
Yep, I was gonna say the same thing. Is
Yeah,
everything that goes along with that and all the problems that creates.
yeah, it's so important. Um, it's something that we can't compromise on. Um, and and when you try to um, add sentience to a monster catching game, there's all sorts of uh, uh, just uh, awful moral conflicts that come
Oh
up.
yeah, like
Um,
yeah,
so keeping that as something that is in the world and having the kinfolk be sentient and individuals like people is something that um, we're absolutely going to keep. Um, but finding clever ways with um, our lore and um, our storytelling to make that work in ways that aren't just awful and make the player feel terrible. It's always very challenging, but um, it's something that we put a lot of effort into. We take the story really really seriously
yeah.
and try
Um,
to um, come up with the best solutions we can for that stuff.
to
And I'm pretty
give
happy with what we've got.
to give a bit of context on just how much trouble that's been giving us, that is something probably one of the very first story things we thought of, and it has consistently been giving us problems ever since we started designing the game. So it has not stopped being a story problem ever since we started.
Yeah, it's just tricky to design around. You
Yeah.
have to, and and maybe problem isn't quite the right way to put it, but it's definitely something that makes it.
Roadblock.
You Yeah, you always have to consider that. Um, Everything that you design is in the. Um, you have to keep that at the front of your mind while you're designing just about everything. So you always have to design around it.
No. And so that was from the game design side of things. What about the coding side?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really just Unity is a moving target. It's always been a moving target. It's always gonna be a moving target. They're so ambitious. They're releasing things constantly. As in every week or two, something's changed, and it's so bleeding edge. It really is awesome on the one hand because we have options, um, and unlike other places like doing work with Apple or Google, it takes a long time for them to release anything. With Unity, it's out and it's moving and it's changing, but that carries risk and bugs on certain schedules, and it's something that we're having to really think about and plan for and put tooling in place so that we can, as the inevitable crashes come or performance issues or the shader works with this version of Unity, but not that version of Unity. Those are all things that we have to put systems in place, and that makes it difficult because it's complexity. And the one thing that we try to avoid as much as we can is complexity, or at least that's something we try to manage, I guess, as much as we can is
Yeah,
complexity because it's inevitable. But
in
so that's
terms of like the code base and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm not talking about in terms of the story, but just in terms of
Right.
the and dealing with Unity as a moving target.
Oh,
I
eh,
would say the most difficult part for me has been just getting my head wrapped around all the characters and all the games and all the abilities. And
Oh, it's fast.
it's a lot of work. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. It's really exciting, but at the same time, it can be a little stressful.
Oh,
Yeah.
you have these plans, and then all of a sudden Rob will say, "Oh, and it can do this," and you're like, "Oh, dang."
I'm sorry, what
No,
now?
wait a minute, that's supposed to work. And we
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we have really conversations on just pulling all these things out of Rob's head. So
yeah, we have this process that we use. We have this thing called the game design document, the GDD, and it's a huge document that we've taken and we worked with Rob and Tori especially, to get everything down on paper. So once it's down on paper, we're able to then figure out what the implications are. We're able to to get all those things into our Jira ticketing system so that we can now build a roadmap. But this is a massive game. And Sheila's right. That's the other side of this, which is it's just the scale of this requires a lot of thought, a lot of planning.
Yep.
Yeah, when
Oh,
I
awesome.
remember hearing about the conversation that Rob had with you two about AEI, that sounded like a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, that'll be great. And the abilities really are the things probably the whole system that are the most complicated things
Mhm.
because the passives and the way they change things for all the active abilities.
So
It
many different interactions.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's unbelievable. And that's but we do a lot of work, and we have done in the past also a lot of work with test-driven development, and that's going to be a huge part of our coding approach to this is TDDing everything to make sure that as we add new abilities, we don't break old abilities because it's just so complex.
Mhm.
We've
Matter of fact,
been
Andrew, I think it's even more complex than the AI is.
we've been
Yeah.
asked, is everyone staying healthy, hydrated, and rested? And I will say I have been staying at least one of those things.
Uh,
Yeah,
Do I
we're
have
good.
to choose? Do I have to
Yeah,
pick one
it's a pick
or?
one.
I usually
Uh,
only pick two.
Okay, but you're pretty
okay, so
ambitious.
earlier on, when we were talking about how you met Rob, you mentioned that you'd both had been on in different companies. You've done lots of projects together and apart. What's
mhm.
been your favorite project that you individually have worked on? And this was a question. I don't recognize this username from Toby Ravens.
He sounds like a
I've
jerk.
You first, yeah.
Oh, I have a couple. My most favorite probably was back way back when I worked for an aerospace company out in Southern California. We were working on a program called Mission to Planet Earth that used Next computers, and we were working with geologists and data scientists from NASA, affiliated with NASA. And we were basically using the Next computers to map things like ozone data and geographical data and data, weather systems, and things like that. And when we first started the project, only the black and white version of the Next cubes were available. So the people at NASA and our people at TRW, which is where we were working at the time, met with people from Next and basically told them we need a color Next computer. So they shipped one to us before they even released them to the public. And the boards inside the computer weren't even soldered together yet. They were all wire wrapped. That's how new it was. They were still working on the layout chipset and the drivers, and we were one of two companies in the world that had early access to the Color Next Cube. And that was really cool. That project was a lot of fun to work on. We got to, meet with a lot of NASA scientists and go to conventions and, talk to people about what the state of the art was for data science, for Earth data science at that time. And that was really cool.
So yeah, John, can you top that?
Man, for first of all, I was on that project.
Yeah, we were on the
Oh, okay,
project
never
together.
mind.
Yeah. So yeah, so I saw all that stuff. Sheila was the one who was doing a lot of the cutting edge graphic work. Um, so you know, boy, I've worked on so many neat projects. So that was one. I did some work with AI back in the day as well. That was really some fun work in doing um, self-driving cars. And the self-driving car technology based on neural networks, which is deep learning, nowadays, goes back a ways, and so that was a lot of fun. A lot of work that I did in iOS and Android were really really fun projects. Doing work, whether it was entertainment applications or whether it was applications for Fortune 500 companies, those were a lot of fun. But probably my favorite projects were projects I've been working on recently that were more AI, financial programming, and one of the things I'm looking forward to the most is marrying all that with VR. So after we get done with Kindred Fates, kind of my next step that I want to do is do AI and some things in the VR financial space. So anyway,
We
that's
we talk a lot about VR.
oh,
Yeah.
VR
Yeah,
is going to
we
be
really do.
fantastic. You
John,
know,
Yeah.
yeah, John really likes VR.
well, and I
Rob really likes VR.
probably
Everyone's like Kindred Fates on VR,
yeah.
Kindred
Uh,
VR.
I mean, it
Mm.
probably I should be talking about mixed reality more than virtual reality, because I think that it's just going to change our world. I think it's going to change our world way more than the phones did. I think that as we look out 5 or 10 years, we're going to be pretty much plugged into our mixed reality from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. And so much that the tools that are being built, Unity has got some amazing tools. Some things that are rumored to be coming out of Apple are going to be amazing, and I'm sure Google's got theirs as well. And then just imagine being able to step into a world where you really are surrounded by your kindred, and being able to play the Kindred Fates game. And Rob and I've talked about the constraints. I mean, Rob, you're probably better to riff on this than me in terms of how hard that's going to be to do,
Oh
but how
yeah.
good it's going to be as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We would love to bring it to VR if it's possible in the future. But we're no strangers to just how difficult, how huge of a task that is. Um, I would not recommend that you expect that for the release of the game, but man, it would be cool to do something like that. It's just such a monumental task, converting a game, especially a game as big as this one is, over to VR. Um,
Yep.
but we're big fans of the technology, so
Could do the
so
Alpha Combat Arena in VR at some point.
yeah,
That could be fun.
the third
oh
person
yeah,
perspective is a bit interesting for VR.
yeah. Although you do get a much bigger field of view,
Yeah.
even though you don't get
Yeah.
that first perspective. Um, Going back to something that we kind of said earlier, though, um, John, do you know anything about the Hubble telescope?
Oh yeah, yeah. So that was one of the first things I did when I got out of school was I was working on the ground system for the Hubble Space Telescope, and it was really fun because one of my roommates in college, who went on to get his PhD in astronomy, was on the user side of that, working out of Georgia. So it was neat because we would get all the data coming down from the Hubble. We process all that, and so building those systems, especially the technology at the time, was really really fun. And Man, it was a neat gig right out of college.
Oh wow. Hubble. Rob, you've outdone yourself with your dev
Yeah.
contacts this time.
Any other
uh,
flexes you want to go ahead and show?
just thought we'd throw that out there.
Yeah. Steve Wozniak now.
No.
Oh yeah, I
Dave.
met Steve.
Yep.
Yeah. Did did you know that I met Steve Wozniak?
I had heard about that, yeah,
Uh,
and I've heard a couple different times about how you nearly met Jobs, but I have
Yeah.
heard about, but the fine
We
people here I don't think have.
we had a few near misses with Steve Jobs. Once when we were working on Mission to Planet Earth, and then another. The biggest company that we ran was called Now Software, and it was a contact and calendar management platform for Mac OS and Windows. And we used to have a 20 by 40 booth at Macworld every year. And the one time that Steve Jobs came to our booth, everybody was on a break.
Ha.
It was
What
the
a bummer.
most disappointing thing. Like, what do you mean he was here while we were at lunch?
But
Oh, bless.
yeah, Wozniak, we used to go to a conference every year, and Wozniak was the speaker there. And the conference would start at midnight on a Wednesday, and it would run until midnight on Saturday,
And nobody slept.
and no one slept. So the whole thing was, sleep
Oh.
was sickly, and and so
And it still is.
It still is. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
our motto at Skymill. And yeah, Wozniak came in at midnight and he sat down and he talked to us for 4 hours. And we were as far away as, I don't know, across the table from Wozniak, 10 feet from Wozniak. And he had the most amazing stories. He was a very clever guy. The guy's lucky he's not in jail.
Oh.
And he's oh my god, what a character! So inspirational dude.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I have a question from in the chat earlier on, from another one from Jeanette. Was just curious, what has been the worst piece of code you have ever seen?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so when I first started out of college, John went to work on the Hubble Space Telescope. I went to work on an Ada compiler that we were putting on a signal processing superchip. And the signal processing superchip had 176 bits in each instruction. So it had multiple processors it was feeding at a time, and multiple memory banks and multiple register banks. Really complex system that had 4K worth of program memory and 4K worth of data memory. Not 4 megabytes, 4 kilobytes. It was tiny. Well, at the time, the government mandated that any code that was going to be written for any chip had to be developed in a programming language called Ada. It was the standard for all across the government. So we bought a Ada compiler system from a company up in Portland, Oregon. It was 400,000 lines of C with no comments, except the only comments that were in there: this is broken, fix it. This is a kludge. This is a bug. So yeah, so we tried to adapt that for our signal processing super chip, and it ran on a VAX VMS machine, and it was the most horrible spaghetti code I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah,
So it was awful.
I don't really have
Oh,
one.
wow.
I mean, I do, but they're not very
Yeah.
interesting stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody made a comment. John sounds like he'd be that old guy that sits on a porch and tells you tales about his life.
Can confirm this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ah, yes.
That's true.
Mhm.
Nailed it.
Come here, sit on my knee, and let me tell you a tale about the war with the Hubble telescope.
Okay, so we're coming to our final two questions, I believe now. So this one's back for Rob and Andrew.
Okay.
Everyone, they're always asking us in the chats, no matter where we are. So, is there another contest coming? Has it been discussed? This
You
is
know,
from Satan Cat.
I have been thinking about that, and I realize it's been a little bit of a break in between the last one, and I would like to get another one going, so I will probably have to talk with Rob about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that's been kind of in the back of our minds. The biggest reason that we haven't discussed it more is probably just all of the work that's going into the Alpha Combat Arena stuff right now, and we recently brought on new developers and a bunch of new artists. So there's so much going on that's going towards the Alpha Combat Arena, and that we're getting spun up there. Um, that's just kind of where our focus is at the
Yeah.
moment.
But I would like to have that
but once-
conversation.
Yeah. Once we get through that stuff, I think it'd be fun to look at that kind of thing again.
Well, I can handle the contest. It's not like I'm working on the arena.
So So there we go. Nothing yet, but
I
getting
will
the alpha out of the way first.
I will work on the contest and
Yes.
see if I can get something out before too
TBA, as
long.
Barry says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one final question that we always ask our guests. But what are your guys' favorite pretzel dips?
Mine is most definitely beer cheese.
Yep, we got another
Ooh,
tally for
we've
beer
had beer
cheese.
cheese.
Beer
Yeah.
cheese. Yep.
Yeah, and I kind of like to make up stuff. So probably I'm saying mine's going to be a uh, Swiss cheese jalapeno with garlic
Ooh,
dip.
Ooh.
That I'd probably whip up.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I'm being pestered by Yoshi in the chat as well, who would like to know what is your favorite meme in general, I believe.
General.
Or kinfolk maybe is a better question. What's your favorite kinfolk?
Or what would be your favorite kinfolk? What's your other think?
My favorite kinfolk is definitely Nyazen.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, we had Mayu on episode 2. That was a
Well,
very fun
I don't know if Mayu's
episode.
still in chat, but they were earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great design.
Oh yeah, that's it.
What about
And
John?
you know, I'm just a shovel butt guy. I really am.
Don't you need
John is the
Scooby?
shovel butt guy, so that'll make Priest happy.
Yeah, it's shovel butt's got everything you need. I mean, it's the complete character.
Were
There we
you
Yeah.
go. You made Priest very, very happy. He's created the Shovel Church in chat. He is the priest of the Shovel Church.
Praise be.
my man?
Okay, so is there any more questions from chat that we'd like to ask before we wrap up? Because that's all the questions that we had set up for today. Otherwise,
I think that might be it.
oh, but they're all talking about shovel butt now. I believe there was one from Ducky earlier on regarding, I think it was what are the requirements for becoming a concept designer or artist for Skymill, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can talk briefly about that. Um, as far as um, positions for like gameplay designers or um, like general game design, um, we don't we don't actually look for those positions. Um, that's pretty well covered by Tori and myself and Andrew. Um, so we don't really look for game design positions. Creature design is another one that um, we have several extremely talented artists that we work really closely with, and um, maybe sometime in the future, maybe we'll open that up to some other designers, but um, we're really happy with the artists that we've got right now, um, and so we tend to keep the monster designs, the kinfolk designs, just to those guys. Um, for uh, uh, more like general concept artists and or modelers or animators, things like that. Um, we tend to look for things that are in people's portfolios that match most closely to what we know we're going to need. Um, I suppose it's really about the same for any job position that you'd have at any other company. Um, we look for people who have examples of similar art styles or um, have created animations that um, are on a wide variety of like body types, for example, um, so that sort of thing. Although I will say that um, we, with the recent artists that we've hired, we're pretty much um, at capacity for the core team as a whole. We're still looking at a couple positions for a couple artists, but pretty soon here we'll have our full team. Um, and
We're
we'll be
so
able to.
close now.
Yeah, we're very close.
Oh, there we go. There's information there. And my final question: people are asking, can we see another Phantom? And Gene said in particular, could we get Phantom Scully? That's Gene's favorite kinfolk.
Do we have any other phantoms?
Do we have
I don't really
any
even.
Phantoms?
We haven't done a whole lot of work on Phantoms
Yeah.
recently. Yeah. Sorry.
Can I?
Soon.
All right.
Eventually.
'Cause-
I know the answer is no, but can I show off the last sketch I got from you?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I thought so. But he's my
Wait.
baby.
Oh, he almost got me with yeah,
Yeah.
but then he added no.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you're teasing the chat now. They're all excited.
I'm
Come on,
afraid
Rob.
not. I'll be the bad guy here.
I'll
I'm
get
okay
him.
with
I'll
that.
get him eventually. I'll wear him down.
Uh-oh, they're going to
Like-
riot the chat.
They're
Yep.
starting to riot.
Uh-oh.
This is the Twitch chat we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, the
No,
new artist
guys,
means new
don't.
concept art.
Oh no. Well, gonna have to start wrapping this up now. I want to say thank you to John and Sheila for joining us as our
Thank you so
special guest
much.
this time. Thank you again to Mr. Rob and Andy Cravens,
Ooh, Andy.
or
You're
Pandrew
welcome.
as people like to call you.
You're very welcome.
And thank you to everyone in the chat for coming along, sticking through it and enjoying everything we've had and finding out a new progress board name as well. That's been pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all for showing up. Sorry for it was a little bit of a techno babble one. For those who aren't too well versed in nerd speak.
Me, Gil, Barry, Gene, we were
Yeah.
loving it. So
Yeah.
that's our thing.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, Barry's in a nerd is loved every moment of this.
Well, we'll have to see you again in 2 weeks for the next stream.
Yes,
Don't know what that is yet.
the relax with the devs.
Yeah. Yeah. Not sure what that'll be yet, but yep.
We have a couple
But yeah,
ideas.
expect much more. And obviously, my side, I've got other things planned for the Faters. We'll be doing some games there with everyone too.
Yep. All right. See you all.
Keep it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.